What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. It's been a hot minute since I made a video, but we are now about halfway through the off season, and I've been getting tons of questions over on Instagram about my off season training. What do I do? What does my strength training look like? And frankly, I do put a lot of thought into my off season, so it's actually really hard to sum any of that information up in an Instagram post. So I'm going to do this more long form video where I kind of talk through how I plan the off season, what my training looks like, both practice wise and also in the gym, and why I make some of the decisions that I do, in the hopes that it's entertaining and perhaps helpful for someone who's trying to get better at disc golf. So anytime in the off season, I always want to start with what am I trying to get out of the next season? So in this case, what do I want to get out of the 2025 season? I think it's very important to start with kind of a broad end goal in mind. That way you can kind of make other decisions a little bit more easily. So for 2025, my goals are to have the best possible performance at every single tournament. Seems kind of obvious, but I will note a few things. I always put these kind of goals in terms of things that I can control. Because obviously I would love to win every single tournament, but I could put up my best performance and someone shoots one stroke better and I don't win. At the end of the day, if I know that I put everything I could into that tournament, I can be satisfied with not winning. So goal number one, best performance at each tournament. And again, we're prioritizing the majors and the end of year tournaments. So throughout the year, perhaps we will kind of periodize things a little bit so that I'm feeling my best at, say Worlds, European Open, and tournaments like that. Number two is to avoid injury and pain in common problem areas. It's 9 months of playing on the road, throwing about 6 days a week. It's really hard to avoid having like pain or little minor injuries here and there, but I do make it a goal to try to avoid those as much as possible. And then these are in no particular order, but the third one I'll mention is just I want life to be enjoyable on the road. It's really, really hard living the lifestyle that we do if you're not enjoying it. So I make that a goal that I'm not grinding myself into dust and I'm not putting performance over at the expense of, having good relationships and enjoying life in general. So the next question I will ask myself is what should I do differently and the same from last off season? Or put differently, what were some of the problems I saw during the season that I think I can fix going into the next year? And I start thinking this way early in the preseason because I know I can kind of experiment with some things and start to build habits that I can then carry into the season. It's really important, I think, to set myself up for success by using this long amount of time that I have. So I will keep these kind of different ideas in mind as I start to structure my off season. And then lastly, before I really dig into the actual planning, of course, I got to look at my calendar because I do get to spend a good chunk of the off season just working, but I'll have, trips, holidays, other things that I need to kind of plan around. And so obviously I keep those things in mind as I'm planning. Now, first I'm going to talk about how I kind of structure things from a practice, like a disc golf skills point of view, and then just more generally, and then I'll kind of dig in and talk about specifically what I've done this off season, what I've been working on, and then I will do the same for the non-disc golf training side of things, so the gym, all of that stuff. So for off-season practice, I like to split things into phases, and each phase kind of gets progressively more sport-specific as we get closer to the season. So phase one will be kind of like a rest and recovery phase. This is usually pretty short, and it really depends on how I'm feeling when the season ends. But usually it's at least a week, sometimes more, but basically no throwing. I'm trying to kind of physically and mentally recover from the season. I'll start to kind of ease into the gym kind of training, the non-disc golf side of things. And then the main focus is setting up an environment for having a very successful off season. Because a lot of this stuff is just having one good practice day after the other. And the easiest way to do that is to have an environment that makes it really, really easy to stick to the plan. So this includes things like cleaning up the gym. So we use Tyler's dad's shop. He lets us use part of it. We have a whole gym set up in there. It's 100 feet away from the trailer. So there's really no excuse for not getting my workouts in when I'm supposed to. That'll include things like organizing my discs and doing maintenance on the course, stuff like that. So I just don't have to worry about it once I get started. It's really easy to find the discs that I need for practice that day, etc. And then the second phase will be technique changes. So if you've heard me talk about making form changes, I always say you can't have your best performance and make form changes at the same time. So that means basically for the entire season, I'm not thinking about form at all, ideally. So that means the best time for me to think about any technique changes is early off season, when I'm the furthest away from having any kind of performance goals. And so usually after I've finished that rest and recovery period, I'll kind of at least tinker with some technique things. Not every off season have I spent a significant amount of time on form changes. I did work on some form stuff this off season, and I will talk about that later. But basically, early off season, best opportunity to make form changes if you need to. Always dedicate at least a little bit of time to experimentation, looking around, like what are coaches that spend the whole year thinking about this, so like what are their new ideas on form stuff, because you never know when you might stumble on something that's actually really helpful and worth pursuing. And the most important thing, at least for me and probably for anyone else who's trying to work on technique stuff and then has a competition date in mind, is it's very important to be realistic about how much I can actually get done in the time that I have. Knowing that it is totally fine to leave some form change stuff to at a later date. Obviously, my form was good enough this past year to win a few times, so it's not the end of the world if I don't make every form change that I want to. It's better to do a little bit successfully and then get the mindset shifted to shots and scoring well and away from technique well before the season starts. And then lastly, with this phase, I want to make sure I leave a little bit of transition time. So if you've ever tried to do form changes, you know that getting it right, getting it looking the way you want to in the net or in the field, and then if you immediately try to go to the course, oftentimes you revert back to your old form and it's extremely frustrating. So I make sure to leave in about 1 to 2 weeks where I'm kind of transitioning from net and field throwing to actually throwing shots on course and getting all of the new changes incorporated. And I will talk about how I do that also later in this. So phase number 3, which is the phase I'm in right now, it's mid-December, is shots practice. So if I've made any technique changes, I need to leave a little bit of time to kind of relearn my basic shots. In the case of this off season, my pull through is a little bit different, my nose angle is a little bit different, my release point's a little bit different. So I do need to spend a little bit of time on the basics to kind of recalibrate and make sure that I'm able to hit my lines. And so what that will look like is a lot of bringing 5 to 10 discs of one mold to one hole, and then practicing just that shot for a few days. At this point, I'm not really focused on technique, but I will periodically audit myself. So that means, I might throw 80 shots in an hour and I'll film like 4 or 5 of them and just kind of make sure I'm still doing the things that I just spent that whole technique phase working on. And if I need to do a little bit of cueing, that's also totally fine. As this phase goes on, I start to do, instead of just doing 1 shot per session, I might mix in other shots so that I'm not doing 2 of the same shot in a row. It gets a little bit closer to game-like. Like I said at the top of this, as I go through the off season, I'm getting more and more sport specific. So that kind of next little bit will involve a mix of shots. And then lastly, I'll start playing loops of several holes. Again, bringing, maybe 4 of one disc, 4 of another, 4 of another, and then just practicing those shots kind of on a loop. And also during the later time of this phase, I'll start working on my list of weaknesses. So for me, that's stuff like certain scramble shots, certain shot shapes that I didn't feel super comfortable with last season. I'll spend a little time on those and try to get more comfortable with them going into the next season. And the final phase of my practice plan for the off season is kind of performance prep. So this is getting super sport specific, about as sport specific as I can get without actually going and playing a tournament. So I'm completely not doing anything technique related. I won't even check my technique at this point in the off season. I don't want to be thinking about it once season starts. I will do a little bit of shots practice if I think I need to continue to develop things. And I do some shots practice even in season. But this will involve playing shorter, like 6 to 9 hole rounds where I'm trying to make it as game-like as possible. So this means I will do a warm-up just like I would for a tournament day. I will only take 1 attempt at each shot. I will wait as though I have card mates. So a long amount of time between shots, and I'll try to visualize the thing like stuff like the crowd, maybe some of the chatter, stuff that I'll experience on game day, and try to recreate how that feels, practice settling nerves, and then most importantly, practice accepting whatever happens with my shot. That's the rough structure of what my off-season kind of phases look like, and now I can tell you guys exactly how I applied that to my off-season this year. So I spent most of November working on a few things, namely nose angle, and then a little bit of a change to my pull through, all in an effort to improve my brace. So this kind of started with, I know I have a little bit of a bent knee when I throw a backhand, which is not the end of the world, but it's not ideal. Ideally, I think you would have more of a straight leg, because that means you're getting more of an efficient brace and getting a little bit more power into the disc. And what I realized with the reason I have the bent knee is because I get to here and then I kind of open. But I found that when I would get more here, kind of what some people are calling like a deep pocket form, if I get to here, then naturally that leg is a little bit straighter. The other problem I found is when I would get here with the straighter brace leg is the disc would go too high. And I busted the tech disc out and found out that I was actually still throwing with a little bit of a nose up angle. So all that to say, I was looking at my brace leg, but the cause and the effect were not the same thing. So using the tech disc, a lot of throwing into the net, a lot of throwing from the knees and standstills drills, I did make a slight change to my grip. I know I've touted in the past having a front-loaded grip, but I've actually changed to more of a mid-loaded grip, which I'm going to grab a disc real quick and show you guys what I'm talking about. All right, so the grip change I made, I know in the past I have touted more of a front-loaded grip, thinking that if you hold the disc out and you grab it and the nose is down, you're good. However, what I kind of found out is it doesn't really matter if the nose is down here. You need the nose to be down when your wrist is still cocked, because when your wrist is straight like that, at that point you've let go of the disc. And so if the nose is down here, but when the wrist is cocked, the nose is up, you're gonna throw a little bit nose up. And I found, at least for me, I can't have that front-loaded grip and keep the nose down, because like my wrist just doesn't bend that way. And so I've kind of gone to more of a mid-loaded grip where like the squeeze is here between kind of this meaty point of my middle finger and kind of the middle point of my thumb. And that lets me keep the nose way down in a cocked position and lets me get actually a much better nose down angle. So getting that in there, that was a lot of net drills, a lot of working with the tech disc to make sure I was doing it right. And then because I'm now throwing nose down, if I keep everything the same about my form, I was throwing into the ground. And a lot of the first attempts at throwing in the field were just me turfing it. So I had to go back, do more net drills of learning a low to high pull through to kind of compensate for that nose down angle. And what that in turn did is, because I was going from low to high, I would end up with a straighter brace leg when I started actually throwing real shots. So grip change, and then also I did a lot of drills of trying to get to here before breaking open rather than being here before breaking open. I think one, you end up with possibly a little bit more speed on the disc, and then two, because you're here, this is a more consistent release point at a variety of speeds than having your hit point be here. And I mean, if you guys got more detailed questions than that, drop them in the comments. I'm happy to talk about that a little bit more, but I want to move on to the other parts of how I do the technique phase of my training. So lots of net drills, and then when I'm ready to move from the net to throwing in the field, I like to do what's called hybrid drills, or what I call hybrid drills. That's basically, I take my net to the field, I will do the net drills that have been working to get me to throw the disc such that it looks on film the way that I want, and then I will start kind of supersetting the net drill with a real throw into the field. And I've got some video of that I'll show you guys. But basically you'll do a couple reps in the net, and then you'll stand up, and then you'll go and do a full throw. And then you'll check back your video and see, is this transferring to the full throw? And I find doing that net drill first kind of primes you a little bit, kind of cues you to actually incorporate into the full throw. And then when I'm trying to transition from throwing into a field to throwing on course, I'll do the same thing where I'll do the net drill, maybe without the net, but where I'm focusing on, I'll do one throw where I'm focusing on the technique, and then I'll try to do a throw where I'm focusing on the shot. and then again checking the video to see if there's discrepancy, if I'm reverting back to my old form. And I consider myself ready to move on from the technique phase fully to shots focused practice when I'm able to throw a real on-course shot without thinking about technique, and it looks right when my focus is on the shot, and maybe just a little bit of cueing kind of before I do the shot. So for this, I would kind of cue like, okay, high to low, let's get the nose down, and then go throw. And if I'm able to do that, first throw of the day without thinking about technique and it looks great on video, I'm ready to start moving on to shots training and just kind of periodically auditing, like I mentioned earlier. Moving on to kind of the shots phase, that's the phase I'm in right now because it is mid-December. But pretty much I'm just taking a stack of discs for whatever shot I want to practice that day. Usually I spend about 30 minutes to an hour per shot that I'm practicing, and then I'll take a little break and I'll move on to something else. I find I'm not really able to focus for more than like an hour straight at a time, and then usually like 2 to 3 hours is about my limit. Mind you, I did count once, and I get about 80 shots in an hour practicing this way. So 3 hours is a lot of shots. As we move to the end of December and into January, I'll kind of shift to more of that performance prep. So no more thinking about technique. It'll be a lot more of just picking chunks of my course to play, and then focusing on getting a good score, all the things that we just talked about at the top of the video. Hey guys, so I got to editing the video and it was way too long, so we're going to split this up into 2 parts. We will talk all things non-disc golf training, so strength training, mobility training, all that good stuff in part 2. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. That'll be coming out in the next couple of days, and thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.